Hello, my name is Jon McDaniel. I am the owner of Second City Soil. It's a wine consulting firm that's based here in Chicago, Illinois, here in the United States. Normally, I'd be coming to you from perhaps a vineyard or a cellar or one of my clients, which I am at all over the world typically. But instead, I'm coming to you from a conference room in downtown Chicago today. You know, when we look at where our world is right now with COVID-19, restaurants closing, wineries not being able to be open, travel being restricted, typically I travel about 100 days a year across the globe, whether that be to wineries or different regions for all sorts of different purposes, wine fairs or client visits. You know, where we are at now is to be able to connect in some way, and that is virtually. I started Second City Soil about 2.5 years ago. I've been in the wine business for 16 years now, and I've basically had every job that you could possibly have in the wine business. I started in retail when I was 21 years old, and kind of the story goes from there. I've been in distribution, importing, lived in New York, in northern Italy, in Trento area. I lived in South Africa, in California, in the Santa Barbara area, where I actually started to make wine and started to get into restaurants. And I've been here in Chicago about 9 years now, where I worked primarily for the Gage Hospitality Group, running all those restaurants. And about 2.5 years ago, left the restaurant scene and decided to go off and start my own consulting firm. What I saw here, specifically in Chicago, was a wine scene that wasn't necessarily parallel with the restaurant scene. It is a city, Chicago, that is very chef-driven, that is very much a chef partner, and not necessarily about the sommelier. So I wanted to create a vehicle to be able to promote my peers the way that I was being able to promote myself. And so from that, Second City Soil was born. How it has changed over the past 2.5 years has definitely shifted from what I thought would just be about restaurant consulting, about helping my local restaurant community and helping with their wine lists. And what I found very quickly was that wine lists and wine programs here in Chicago, if an operator is not going to invest in a sommelier, in a wine director, they certainly aren't going to invest in some sort of outside external consultation. So I've definitely had to shift my business model. But at the same time, when you look at Chicago, the Midwest, and really the US, as you know, the bigger companies get much bigger. Wineries, trade organizations, regions, all sorts of different marketing entities are looking for ways to expand their brand, to look for innovation, to look for creativity. And so that's kind of where I come in somewhat of an old school broker model, but updated for the 21st century. What I do is I work with my winery clients, with my trade organization clients, on really how do we answer the first question for locally, how do we do better in Chicago? How do we increase our sales? How do we increase education about the brand, about the region? So I do different seminars and webinars on all of those to answer that question. And that question has expanded as well to how do we do better in the US? How do we do better with the on-premise? How do we do better with the trade, with consumers? And then on a global nature, how do we do better across the world with our sales and education? During this time specifically, when we look at the issue with COVID-19, our entire chain of how wine gets from point A to point B basically stopped. With the on-premise, the restaurant scene closing in a lot of markets, and any restaurant that was able to do anything at all was basically in the to-go model. When you look at that to-go model, it wasn't like consumers were ordering Grand Cru Burgundy to go. It was really the by the glass kind of program, list of, hey, I want an easy bottle of wine to add on tonight. And when we look at, what that pricing would be, it's not the typical 4-time markup. It's more retail markup is how that kind of ended up being. So, that's really the crux of my company, is really helping people move from point A to point B, and now in a very different, kind of a world. So when we look at how, my business model has changed, if we, with tariffs happening at the beginning of 2020, clients that I had at the beginning of the year, probably down about 70% with those clients. But when we look at, the structure of my business from March 1st and on, I'm up over 100%. If we look at the new ways that brands are trying to get in front of consumer and for trade. I built a reputation to be able to make those connections over the last couple of years and beyond. So I was already positioned very well to be able to, help people move from point A to point B, to help wineries, to help trade organizations and wines of fill in the blank or the different consortiums around the world, to be able to connect themselves with trade customers, with consumers in a new and innovative way. And so that's, I think, the model going forward for Second City Soil. And the second company that I started is called the Vine Hive, which will be kind of Second City Soil 2.0, the expansion of that model into more national and global projects. So when we look at how sales are changing, definitely it's shifting away from the on-premise circles into how do we move more to direct to consumer? How do we move more towards connecting the winery directly to that end person that's going to be drinking the bottle of wine, as sommeliers are out of work right now, as retailers are focusing mostly on the things that are already in their sets, bigger brands, and so it's difficult to get new items placed in retail. So it's really helping wineries connect and helping them sell to the direct-to-consumer channel. So, my largest client and the biggest priority and project that I have is a company called VinConnect. VinConnect is a really incredible model and platform because it connects European wineries directly to American consumers the same way that an American allocation list or mailing list would do for those different wineries. Obviously, a winery in Tuscany or in Burgundy cannot ship and sell directly to American consumers with customs laws and importing and all those things that are set and blocked by the 3-tier channel. However, with VinConnect, we have set up legal logistical channels through different licensing to be able to allow a winery in Montalcino or in the Mosel or Chateau Moussard in Lebanon, for example, to be able to sell directly to their customers through regular different releases. And so looking at how that model and the direct-to-consumer model has really changed and grown, that's a really exciting project for me as we look at 2020 and beyond, being able to shift a little bit in that. So I think that's how really the market has changed, where we look at how wineries are going to be able to create their own destiny, to control how they get to market. Because the reality is that our 3-tier system, our normal market of distribution, is broken. Is the big are getting bigger, and those distribution networks are having too many brands. They have too many SKUs or different wines in their portfolio, and their sales reps, their frontline people, are not educated enough to be able to sell one or the other, and they are worried more about the quotas of a particular brand that they have. So that really is how I focus in my business model, is working with those different wineries that, if they are in a larger distributor, how to bring more attention to them, or in a smaller distributor, how to get that smaller distributor in front of the right people, to get them into the better accounts, and to be able to connect that. So, when we're looking at what customers are buying now, they're buying, very similar to what they were buying before. It's just looking at the price points. When they're buying retail, they're going to their tried and true, what is comfortable for them. If they are typically used to buying a $20 bottle of Chardonnay from California, they're going to stick to that kind of a model of that budget, and that continuously. They may buy more different wines or more bottles of the same thing, but when we're trying to get them to try new wines, to experiment a little bit, that budget really isn't as large as it may once was, because that trust isn't there. They aren't able to try it the same in a wine bar or a restaurant setting by the glass. So when they are trying new wines, a retailer, the model isn't there to really help suggest new things. So customers, I find, are buying very similar things. When we look at direct to consumer, what they're buying and the kind of price points are also somewhat the same, but they're still looking for more new things. They're looking for, different vintages of the wineries that they love, the regions that they love, of trying new producers, but still kind of staying to those somewhat similar varietals and those similar ways of doing things. When we look at our COVID-19 world now, I do Zoom tastings and different ways to connect wineries to their end consumer almost every day. And so that's really the goal, is to connect these different wineries, to connect these brands in a way of, typically they would go around the country and they would do ride-alongs and visits to accounts. Now it's all right, look at spending that money in a different way. Look at spending that budget virtually, through a company like Second City Soil. So this now with COVID going on, and now looking at how we are going to change our business model going forward, I think a lot more virtual tastings, a lot more ways to connect to people in a way of, all right, maybe I'm not face to face with you, maybe I'm not in your account, an extra email to them, an extra way to connect directly to that consumer. I think that that's going to be the new way, and a really exciting way to share new information, to share new ways to show vineyard sites and video and all kind of different ways of communicating into the different vessels of tasting. It's quite an exciting time in the wine world when we look at it. So the one thing that I look at coming away from this is that for a winery, for a brand, for a new potential client that I may have, if you are just sending wine to a state and saying, all right, my distributor is going to take care of everything, that reality is dead. You have to be able to be plugged into that state. You have to be able to plug in directly to those accounts. And whether it is in Atlanta, Georgia, or Dallas, Texas, or Chicago, finding someone like myself that is going to be able to, maybe you can't afford a regional manager for that area, a full-time benefited salaried employee, but maybe you can afford 10% of one. And so really, how I work with my clients and how the future of the wine business is going to be in different markets around the country and around the world, it's the winery working harder through their different agents, through their different resources, to be able to connect directly to accounts and connect directly to the consumer. That's the reality. That's our future of our business, and I think a very exciting one, for wineries to be able to control what's going on for them. It's a pleasure to be in the wine business. It's a pleasure to be at this time of, having a business model that, was already set up for this, was already really set up to be able to connect, customers directly to the wines that they love, the regions that they love, and I'm excited to see how this is going forward. So it's always a pleasure to talk to people about this, and I'm looking forward to sharing more stories and being that, hospitality type individual as sommeliers, and as that group of individuals is still looking for work. Finally, the thing I'd love to mention related to sommeliers being out of work and out of business is I was part of the founding of the United Sommeliers Foundation. This is a foundation that was started middle of March of 2020, related directly to the COVID-19 crisis, where looking at sommeliers that are out of work. Most people think that sommeliers are six-figure salaried, wear amazing suits, drink amazing wine all the time, when the reality is that the vast majority of them are hourly employees that work off of tips, work off of being able to sell directly to people in the restaurant. That's not possible now, and so we've set up a fund to be able to, help offset some of the costs, of living for sommeliers that are out of work. So the United Sommeliers Foundation is a collection of sommeliers around the country, leaders in their industry and in their cities, being able to, utilize our connections to be able to raise money, of which we've raised almost $1 million, for the sommelier community to help them during this crisis, and whatever that next crisis may be, whether it's a tornado in Tennessee or a hurricane or whatever that may be, we want to be able to create a foundation to support our community. So it's a pleasure to be, a leader and a pillar, of the sommelier and of the wine community here in the U.S. And I look forward to continuing to share that with my peers and with consumers for many years to come. Thank you.